Improving your rendering doesn't have to take forever. I've been doing a quick exercise that speeds up my progress more than anything else I've tried. And it's way easier than you think. Let me show you. So these are some of my fully rendered characters. They look alright, but would you believe me if I told you this took me over 25 hours? That's way too long. One of the main reasons I'm so slow at rendering is because I struggle with brush control, specifically things like opacity, pen pressure, and blending colors effectively. As you can see here, the brush strokes are visible. The shading is far from smooth. I like to have a little bit of texture, but this is not the look that I'm aiming for. Here, I was trying to hardcore blend, avoiding tools like the mixer brush or the soft brush because I wanted to gain as much control over my brush as possible. But as you can see, I'm really struggling. I found myself going the same areas again and again to compensate for my lack of control, which is slowing me down. So that's my starting point, but I'm determined to get better. My goal is to render faster and more effectively, and to achieve that, I decided to dedicate some time to practicing pure rendering skills by focusing on simple 3D forms. And I started by creating my own references in Blender. Now, if you want to do the same, here's a quick 2D artist-friendly way to create your own 3D compositions. Once opened Blender, click anywhere on the screen to start. To move around the viewport, just hold the middle mouse button, and by pressing Shift, you can pan the view. By default, you'll see a cube. You can keep this for your compositions, but for demonstration purposes, I'll delete it and start fresh. Let's create a simple shape by going to Add, Mesh, and select an object from here, or by using the shortcut Shift-A to add. Let's create a sphere, for example. Here we have it. Right-click and choose Smooth Shading to make the surface smooth. Then go to Modify Properties, click Add Modifier and choose Subdivision Surface. This basically smooths out the surface even more. Now, to move an object, you can either use the move icon on the left here. These arrows will pop up and you can use them to move the object, or the keyboard shortcut Shift-G to grab the object. If you want to move it along a specific axis, just press X, Y, or Z on your keyboard after grabbing. Once you're happy with your changes, left-click to confirm the movement. The same goes for rotating, R, and scaling S on your keyboard. If you're having a hard time remembering the shortcuts, don't worry, you can always find the corresponding icon on the left-hand toolbar. One tip to make things easier, head over the Transform Orientation menu in the top here and switch from Global to Local. This centers the arrows on the object itself instead of the world view, which makes positioning more intuitive. Alright, once a composition is set up, it's time to render it. The shortcut to render is F12, but you'll notice here the viewport you were working with doesn't match the render output. That's because Blender renders from the camera's point of view, this little object right here. To adjust the camera, first select it, you'll even see highlighted in the top right panel, and then press N to open the Properties panel. Then in the View tab, click the Lock to Camera View option, number pad 0 to view from the camera's point of view. Now you can move the camera around just like you normally would in the viewport. Once you frame your scene, make sure to unlock the camera again so you don't accidentally move it while working. To see the final results before rendering, switch to Render View with this icon right here. From there, you can adjust the lighting by moving it around to get the shadows and highlight you want. You can even swap it for a different type of light, like an area light, for example, to create a different effect. Click on the lights icon right here. You'll be able to change its intensity and its size. Finally, let's tweak the material properties of the objects. I recommend adjusting the roughness to control how shiny or matte the object appears. This will help you study different materials and textures. And before rendering, don't forget to switch the render engine from Eevee to Cycle for more accurate ray tracing and lighting. And once you're happy with everything, hit F12 again, go to Image, Save As, and just save your render whatever you like. And there you have it. That's how you create your own composition. Now let's move on to the actual exercise. With my reference setup, I'm ready to start rendering. I'm starting with the simplest composition possible in terms of light, just soft shadows to outline the forms. This allows me to focus purely on the rendering, without worrying too much about complex values, although I'm still keeping an eye on them in the back of my mind. I started with a cube, but the main struggle is rendering curved surfaces, areas that tend to bend in one way or another. This cube has a simple gradient that was easy to replicate. So from here on out, you'll see me focusing on painting mainly spheres and cones, because that's where I need the most improvement. And as you can see, my first try didn't come out great. I'm working the paint back and forth, and my brushwork isn't as precise or thoughtful as I'd like. But each time I move to a new solid, I'm getting slightly better. As I progress, I'm increasing the difficulty by choosing more complex lighting scenarios. But aside from that, I'm keeping things simple because my goal here is to focus on brush control and blending. Often, we aim too high with our practice. Instead of trying to render an entire character or a complete illustration, I believe sometimes it's far more beneficial to focus on simple forms first, like the ones that I'm painting here. This allows us to really target the specific skills we want to develop, in my case, mastering color blending, without feeling overwhelmed. This exercise is also fantastic as a warm-up. I decided to dedicate a few days to it, but it's great to sprinkle it between other projects. I'll definitely incorporate it more often in my work, moving forward. As I work through this exercise, I'm paying close attention to how I hold my pen, how much pressure I apply, how I move my hand. I want to be conscious of my jaws so that they serve me and not the other way around. I'm trying to shift my approach by putting more thought and intentionality into my movements. One of my goals here is to make as few brushstrokes as possible, but as you can see, I'm not quite nailing that yet, but it's okay. I want to show my struggles because when we watch other artists, it's easy to think that they easily get things right the first time, but that's far from the truth. Progress takes time and effort, and that's what you're seeing here. Now, after working in black and white for a while, I started to get bored and wanted to challenge myself with color. So I jumped back into Blender. To add a color to your objects, head over to the Material Properties tab. You can select any color for your solid from here. At this point, I wanted to shift the mood of the scene and create a softer, more atmospheric light. And so I added a sunlight. To start, head over the World tab. There is a little yellow dot next to color. Click that and select Sky Texture from the options. Right away, you'll see that the light is a bit too intense. No worries, go to the Render tab and under Color Management, drop the exposure down to -2 to tone things down. Next, you can tweak the sun elevation slider to adjust the look of your scene. You can really dial in how soft or dramatic you want the light to be. It's all about experimenting until you get a result that feels right for your composition. And that's it. By tweaking these settings, you'll have a more dynamic lighting setup that adds depth and realism to your scene and have a variety of references to study from. Introducing colors adds a new layer to difficulty. While we can get away with some overblending in black and white, color can easily become muddy if overworked. Here, I have to be much more precise to avoid colors bleeding into each other. This not only can let me lose the brilliance and vibrancy of the colors, but can also mess with the 3D effect and the actual values of the shapes. But as I continue practicing, I started feeling more comfortable with my brushwork. To test my progress, I went back and revisited the initial exercise of blending colors without using a soft brush or a smudge tool. Just pure pen pressure. And although there's still room for improvement, I'm definitely a tiny bit better than when I started a couple of days ago, which is satisfying. At this point, I felt more confident rendering simple shapes, so I'm ready to move into something more complex. I also want to try a more painterly and textured approach, so I thought it would be helpful to study a style I really admire. But I'll share more of that in my next video. See you there!